All right, welcome back to Marlins 9. It is Wednesday. The trade deadline has passed, and I'm joined on the podcast once again by Peter Pratt. Peter, thank you for coming on. I'm excited for this one.
Me too, Jeremiah. This should be an extravaganza, this one. There's a lot to get into. So what a deadline, but yeah, looking forward to this.
Definitely. I mean, first off, we got a little graphics package going on here. So if you're watching on YouTube, did a little update here, So got
Looking flames.
on the ticker just below, we got all the additions that the Marlins made this trade deadline season and then who we subtracted from the team. So we're going to kind of break it down. I know a lot of people, like myself, to be included, didn't know a ton about these prospects and really what to make of this trade deadline. There was a ton of trades going on. Peter Bendix was absolutely cooking. So we're going to break it down and go from there. But Peter, first off, I just want to get kind of your reaction after the dust had settled. It's 6 o'clock. Trade deadline's over. What was your reaction?
Volume, I think is the word. Just the sheer volume of deals that was executed. It was, I put out a little video in the morning when I woke up. I was sitting there. It was like 8 a.m. my time. So, you guys in the States were still snoozing at this point. But, 8 a.m. my time, sat outside, sun shining, coffee in hand. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a very busy day. And I could see a lot of action. And that's how it played out. And yeah, fair play to Peter Bendix. It to me, the outside looking in, it felt like there was a strategy around almost the sequence. I feel like of where they knew they had to get a lot done, and when you've got to get a lot done, it's about okay, how are we going to sequentially do this to make sure that we're not overwhelmed at the buzzer? And so that, to me, was something that really stood out on this one, was just the sequencing of, well, we're going to move Jazz a few days in advance, and we're then going to move Trevor. Like that becomes the first piece, quite early on. Then there was then the Bell thing happens. Then there's a lull, and then it's bang, 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 and then a little more of a delay, and another bang. So, it was impressive, operational management of a deadline for Peter Bendix to get so much volume done, and not be panicked and rushed. I think that's the point, right? Is when you've got that clock, which there truly is a clock, and you've got stuff to do, trying to get everything done you want it can be tough. So, yeah, a lot of volume. I recorded the pod last night live with Sean pretty much. And it's hard to make a snap reaction because you just don't know a ton of these guys. You haven't heard of any of them. And so you've got to, take a little bit of time after to kind of look and review and get a sense about like, who have we really got back and how are other people viewing this? And, so the proof's going to be in the pudding, right? The guys are going to report to the teams and we're going to start to see them. And we're already starting to see some of them, from, the earlier trades happening. So, and because the big league clubs where it's at, a lot of eyeballs are going to be on these minor leaguers now for, the next couple of years. Like anything that's had a Bendix trade, particularly a big one, Jazz deal, Arias deal, the guys involved in those deals, we're going to be closely following them, very closely following them. So there's pressure on them guys too, like Brinson felt actually when he came, as part of that big deal with Yelich. Like Brinson felt that pressure and the need to perform because, when you're a headliner in a deal, that's the expectation.
To me, it felt like there was almost a narrative flip, a narrative changed when dating back to even last week when AJ Puck got traded to the Diamondbacks. It was kind of out of the blue. We knew, Eli Sussman and everybody around the team suspected he was a trade chip. And why not? He had multiple years of control, was absolutely dealing at the point. And he goes to the D-backs for De Los Santos, who, most home runs in minor league baseball in AAA. And you're like, whoa, this isn't a 19-year-old in low A ball here. He's going for a guy that can be up in Miami and producing. And then you saw the Jazz trade and you see, okay, that one hurt. I'm not going to lie. As a fan, I loved Jazz Chisholm. He was my favorite player on this current Marlins team, but I had expected him to get traded. Okay, what's the return? Augustin Ramirez. It's already homered in AAA. I mean, these guys, De Los Santos and Ramirez, the headliners, are close to being major league ready, if not major league ready right now. And to me, I had to step back and say, okay, so the narrative of him going after low-level prospects, high projection, maybe a lack of production, but it kind of flipped, because now we're going to see, okay, how long is this rebuild really going to be before we start to see these guys in Miami? And then you talked about Trevor Rogers. That was a shock to me, because I didn't think, think about it. 2 months ago, would you have said there was a market for Trevor? I wouldn't have. I thought he was cooked.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it. I'm with you. I don't think the expectation was that there was a huge market, but yeah, we're a couple of months down the line. He's definitely had he's had a decent run, I would say, in advance of the deadline. But listen, the numbers are the numbers. It's fine. But when you watch the games, we watch the games. We watch Trevor Rogers pitching, and I watch Trevor Rogers, and he doesn't miss any bats. And I look and think, what kind of role is he going to play in the Euros? Like, is he just going to be an innings filler for the regular season? Is that what the role is? Like, I'm not convinced that in the highest leverage in a postseason, series, that you're going to be trotting Trevor Rogers out there to start a game. I don't think you are. I think I can see him probably being out of the bullpen or not even making the roster in the postseason for the Orioles. So, because that's the profile of Trevor Rogers at this point. Like, I just wouldn't trust him in the highest leverage of spots. A guy that doesn't miss bats anymore, and for the Marlins to spin that into two well thought of prospects, and we're going to see them very soon, and we'll be able to make our own assessments on them, and I'll make mine quickly around them, and we'll see what we've got, because we've got two guys that have got some hype, they've got some pedigree, they've got some projection. But let's put them into Miami firstly. Let's put them at the big league level, and let's see what's there really, and that's going to be the acid test for these guys, because as we've seen all the time, Lone Depot is one of the worst environments possible from an offensive standpoint. And so our expectations should be aligned to that, everyone struggles in Lone Depot. No one wants to hit there. It's a terrible park for everyone. So we're going to see. But it's a great point to call out, and one that caught me off guard too. Everything they've done thus far with the draft, with the trades, we're talking 19-year-olds. And then all of a sudden, we get some guys that are near to big league ready, which is interesting. And so for me, that was the most encouraging thing, is that it isn't just 19-year-olds only, and we're talking about 2030. There was maybe a glimmer of hope where 2026, this could start to come together. I still think 2025 will be probably a wash. I still expect the Marlins to pick in the top 5 in at the back end of that season. But I think come 2026, maybe they'll start to be in a position where some of this talent they've acquired will start to feed through. Who knows with the guys, a decision will be made before then around Jesus Luzardo, around Jesus Sanchez. Like, in the next year, both of those guys will probably be dealt as well. Sandy Alcantara is going to be a question as well. So, the rebuild isn't finished yet. The trades will never finish. That's the point, right? Like, the Rays way, we see it. We see it, up close and personal with the Rays. You get into ARB1, and the clock is ticking on when you're going to be moved at that point. That's just the model. And they're the best in the business at that. It's tough for the fans. Never attach yourself to one player is the advice, because you've got 4 years max of a player. And then after that 4 years, that's probably going to be it. And it's going to be like, okay, who's the next guy I'm rooting for?
We got the picture here. I'm going to pull it up of all the players that the Marlins traded away this deadline season. That's a ton. That's 9 guys, a third of their active roster dealt away for a volume of prospects, but also talented prospects. We have a mixture here of both major league ready guys, Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. First off, my brother is a diehard Orioles fan, and he texted me, and I said, "We robbed you guys." He's like, "Yeah, you did." And he couldn't understand it. He's like, "Why are you trading us Trevor Rogers for Norby and Stowers?" It made no sense. And it's not just him. To me, that was the best trade of the day.
Yeah, agreed.
By far, because now you can, we've already seen Stowers make his Marlins debut, golden sombrero. It's rough, but it's one game. Norby in AAA. I'm really high on Norby. I think he's hit everywhere he's gone. So you're looking at something in 2025 where you could have a developmental year for all these guys. Looking at the list, I could say Connor Norby, Um, you know, Kyle Stowers, Augustine
Yep.
Ramirez, all these guys, Graham Pauley, another one who's already debuted. All these guys will have
Yep.
major league experience. And now you're going to have in 2026, it almost feels like to me the possibility of the Kansas City Royals, where last year they were terrible. This year,
Mm-hmm.
no one expected them to compete, and they're ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Another small market team, and maybe 2026 is the year. 2027, I would expect them to compete. But I mean, looking at this list, it gets me excited. It gets me excited because now I see a plan. I think is the main thing is there was a lack of direction that I
Mm-hmm.
felt as a fan.
Yeah.
I was sitting there, especially after the Arias trade. I'm like, what are we doing? We're not adding to the major league roster. We're subtracting from the roster and getting guys back that won't contribute. And now there starts to be a shift in that, and I'm really excited.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. And it's funny. I just recorded my own show and had Loud Marlins fan on there. And he said the same. He
Yeah.
echoed exactly the same sentiment where before the deadline day specifically, he was struggling to see it, was struggling to, make a decision around, am I going to renew my season ticket? Because, it looks to me like there's not really going to be much to go and enjoy in next season. But all of a sudden you make a few more moves and it's with guys that you think are going to be on the big league roster, and they should be because, a good chunk of those names you talked about then are already on the 40 man or need to be on the 40 man. So that means, there's a chance they could be on the big league roster, and, that changes it, right? It changes the optics a little bit of, okay, we've acquired guys. They're going to be on the big league roster, and then, you've then got a fresh batch of new fun group. And it does look like, in terms of when you sit back and look at some of the profiles, there's some fun ones. I think obviously De Los Santos looks fun. Big free swinging, power hitting first baseman looks fun. Like if he can make enough contacts, he should be a really fun prospect. I mean, he looks a little bit similar to like a Herrera and Encarnacion, to be honest with you. And so that's kind of maybe the slight risk that. But listen, we don't know yet, but he could be fun. The catcher looks like he could be fun. It's very interesting. The Marlins have targeted some like ultra high, power sticks in this profile as well, which they need. I think that's the point in Lone Depot. Like you need a few of them. Like we saw the impact the Hoy Soler can have last year in the lineup. Like you have to have at least one of them in the lineup, maybe two, really, in Lone Depot to, change the game. And that's what we saw last year with Soler. That stick can change a game with one at bat. And as much as you love Luis Arias and Xavier Edwards, they're not game changers like that. You need to have a Soler, and maybe De Los Santos is that role. And Augustin Ramirez could equally play that role. So, you've got a group here that may well, you look at opening day. What could opening day look like? Is it going to be 4 or 5 of these guys, starting? Why not? And, to get this rebuild going and to get the fan base engaged, I think that's the direction they should take. Like, I know there's service time considerations that come into this because you don't want to burn service time in terrible years. Use service time at the right time. But at the same time, for Bendix, for the fans, for the organization generally, they need to put a product on the field at least that entertains in some sort of way or excites. You can't just trot out a load of old vets on 1-year deals that win 65 games and go, we're playing for 2027. Like I don't think that's the approach they should take. But I'm very interested to see what they do on that aspect. And we've already seen service time manipulation this year around Max Meyer. It's unquestionable service time manipulation. I think there's going to be service time manipulation specifically next year with Yuri Perez. I don't think we see Yuri Perez at all next year. At the big league level. I think he does come back, but I think they'll send him down and they'll leave him down in AAA akin to what they've done with Max Meyer. That's my gut feel with that one. So they're going to play those games. They're already playing them. Are they going to play it with these guys too? That's the question now. Like, how far are they going to go with service time manipulation? Not for Stowers because he's 27. It's different for him. But for the younger guys like De Los Santos, Ramirez, they're younger guys. Do you want to start their clock now? That's the question. And we're going to see it. We're going to see what approach they take.
it makes me feel as almost in the offseason, we're going to see probably more trades. I mean, Jesus Luzardo, I guarantee if he was still on the roster, he would have been traded. Not on the roster, but healthy. I
No
think you
doubt.
would have seen him get traded. And to me, you feel like this rebuild is only starting. You said that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a one and done thing. They're not going to be good next year.
No.
I hope as a fan they'll be good and better, I should say better in 2026, because I don't think you can engage a fan base under this new model of building a roster. We want to be competitive year in year out. I don't think you can have a fan base agree with that statement if you suck and lose 100 games the next 2 years. I just don't. You have to
I
see
know.
some gradual improvement.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
I think you said it best that opening day is going to tell us a lot. We have the service time to factor in, but who of these guys are going to stick and get the majority of at-bats in the majors? And that's just something we have to see and watch them develop, because Bendix did his part. Now the player development has to do their part. But was there a under the radar trade per se that you've had a couple days to, or 12 hours to kind of look at and just say that was one of my favorites, underrated? If there's any one of those.
Yeah, do you know the headliners, the ones that everyone have gravitated to make sense. Like people have gravitated to the Trevor Rogers deal primarily, but I think in some ways we probably underrated the Tanner Scott package, in my opinion. Like it kind of like it happened, and then I don't know. It felt like, it feels like to me that could be a monster deal for the Marlins because of what they can do with pitching development and what we've seen with West Coast pitchers coming over to Miami. We've seen it time and again, and the Padres, for whatever reason, they struggle to develop high projectable arms. They just have an organizational challenge there, like the Marlins have had with the offensive dudes for years. The Padres have the same challenge, but pitching wise. And so when we look back on 2 months of Tanner Scott and multiple years of Brian Hoeing, I mean, swing man, he's effective. But when we look back on that deal and look at what the Marlins got, and you can see it rolling around the ticket here, like Robbie Snelling, Missouri, these two dudes could be huge pieces for the Marlins for, 5 years. And
I agree.
I think a lot of people, we talked a lot about Trevor Rogers' return. But honestly, 2 months of Tanner Scott effectively for those two arms. I know there was other pieces in there, but those two arms specifically, man, oh man, that's an even fatter dub, probably. Once the Marlins get hold of these guys, and that's what I expect. And this is the thing. This is what I was talking about a few days ago. I was very interested that all the deals was all sticks. I want to see more arms in there because that's what the Marlins are, an arm factory. We've seen it.
They're the best at it.
The best at it. Let's keep doing that. That's how you create sustainable success, is you draft and develop what others can't, because then they'll overpay to come and get it for you. And what have we seen at this deadline? Everyone overpaying for arms. And okay, the conditions were amazing, but in some ways, this is just the norm of the conditions now, because the extended playoffs, the way baseball's gone recently is like, you got the spenders, but the rest, everyone's trying to, have cheap labor effectively. And so there's this long tail of the middle that are going to be open for business every year. And so from a Marlins perspective, I look at it and think, let's maybe not deviate away from what we're amazing at. Let's not throw the baby out with the, what's that saying? I don't know.
The
but
bathwater.
Exactly. There you go. Exactly. And not deviate. So I was getting a bit concerned, thinking there's a bit, few too many sticks here. What's going on? But then this deal in particular, I look and thought, that's the Marlins. That's where, when you reflect in a few years' time and go, okay, what was the war accrued from each of these deals? For me, the Tanner Scott one, I think, will far outweigh any of them.
And also you have to think about too, for the fans out there that were thinking maybe the Padres got the better end, they looked immediately at the numbers, at the stats, and say, oh, this guy, he's getting absolutely blown up in Double-A, Robbie Snelling or Adam Mazur.
Yeah.
You have to realize that, like, from an organizational perspective, the Marlins, top to bottom, have developed pitching time and time again. They know what they're doing. Snelling's 20 years old. It's not like he's 24 in Double-A and was a former top prospect. He just entered the professional baseball. Adam Mazur, he got, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm going to try. Adam Mazur, he got rushed to the big leagues. Like, should not have been up. The Marlins know that, and they know what they can do with these two. And you only have to go back just a year ago when they acquired Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers,
they did the same.
It's the exact same profile. He got rushed to the big leagues, absolutely getting blown up, goes to Miami. And this year, if he had stayed healthy, there would be an argument for him to have been an all-star. He was pitching that well at the beginning of the season. So I agree with you 100%, Peter. These two guys in particular, insert into the organization, let them have a year of development, and then reevaluate. I guarantee you're going to see an entire different profile on how people look at them, because they have talent, they have stuff, and there's absolutely no better team to work with them than the Marlins, and ultimately, Mel Stoudemire Jr. So I'm really excited with that one. With the Tanner Scott return. The other one that I was a little, I guess, more, I don't even know how to describe it, confused about, but also understanding, was the Brian De La Cruz trade, because he had multiple years. I was listening to your pod, and Sean Barrett felt the same way.
He felt the same. He said exactly the same. He did,
because you have a guy with multiple years of control, and you didn't have to move him, and you traded him for essentially two top 20 prospects who are, very, in the lower stages of their development. Garrett Forrester, infielder, hasn't hit for power, still high A ball, I believe. And then the intriguing part was Shim, Silk Shim, who has electric stuff, but hasn't pitched. He's barely pitched in professional baseball. So it's like two projects you can work with for essentially 3.5 years of Brian De La Cruz. And at the top, it's kind of a head scratcher. But then I started thinking, I said, okay, so you have De La Cruz, you know what he is, you know his profile. He's not a game changer in of itself. You've already gotten major league ready guys. You can't get a guy for a De La Cruz trade who has the same profile or projected to be better than him. No one's going to agree to that, because you know what De La Cruz is. He's a power bat. He hits for 240, 250. You're not going to get much. Bad defense. But what you can do is you can take that and take two top 20 prospects who have a ton of projection, especially Shim, and work with them. So honestly, thinking about it, I like it. I really do.
It's funny because, Sean looked at it the same as you're looking at it. Like, the initial confusion was there, right? And, Shim is the one, right? This deal hinges on Shim overall, because, and where have we heard this before? This is like, the buyer beware section now, right? Where have you heard this before? Where you've got electric stuff, but has been hurt 3 years in a row. Like, that's the Sixto Sanchez vibe, right? Like, I'm not, but that's the situation we've got here, where you've got a hugely projectable dude with immense stuff that just can't stay healthy and hasn't been able to stay healthy for a couple of years. And so, the profile, if they can get him healthy, is very intriguing. But that's going to be the question. They're getting him back because he's pitched 8 innings in 3 seasons or whatever it might be. Like, there's some red flags associated with that. The Marlins are taking a big risk on that situation, and we've seen how that has played out in real time with Sixto, where the injuries kick in. It's not the same guy anymore. You can project all you want, but Sixto, after the injury, I mean, Shim's had some different injuries to Sixto, but the point I'm making there is, like, these injuries start to take their toll, and you're 3 years out. The next thing is, what you saw on tape 3 years ago, it doesn't exist anymore. It's Kaiser Soze. Like, that's kind of what happens. So I'm confused in some ways at the deal. It's a risk for the Marlins. They're going for the upside, and this is where they've shot, I think, at this deadline, is They're hunting upside, which I'm all for in a rebuild. I'm all for shooting for upside dudes. You know, when you look at what the Orioles did and you go, well, you went and got Trevor Rogers. I'm not sure they're shooting for upside there at all in that deal. The Orioles, they're looking for safe. They're looking for steady, solid. And the Marlins are like, right, we're taking some risks and we're shooting for upside. And frankly, you look at some of the profiles, Shim included in that, De Los Santos for certain, Ramirez for certain, Stowers for certain. These are all like upside plays. But then it's up to the Marlins to help them realize that upside, right? That's the next tricky bit. And
that's the key.
You know, that is the key. And this has been, you know, we've seen pitching development up close. We've seen what it can do. But offensive development has obviously been a huge problem for this organization. Things are being run differently now. Feels like things are turning in the right direction. But again, still early days and proof's in the pudding. So, you know, that's the thing. Can the Marlins develop some sticks? They've added some. Can they develop them?
That is going to be the issue or the
question.
the success. You know, it's either going to be boom or bust, because if this doesn't work, you're in a mess of trouble. But I think that you added all this power. You added a couple arms. I think you did very well at the trade deadline. And now we just have to wait, because the trade deadline's passed. And honestly, the Marlins season is cooked anyway. What do you watch the Marlins for, and how much are you going to be paying attention to AAA, AA? I found myself watching a AAA game on MILB TV the other night.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like we've already seen, like, you know, you're on Twitter like me, and that's our source of information, and you've already seen the shift of content. You know,
yeah,
we're now getting clips of the guys that have been traded for. You know, the guys that are already playing that, you know, recent trades have happened. And that's the shift now. We're in a rebuild mode. You know, the big league roster, the big league club at the moment, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters there. You know, sports is, and from a viewing experience, in my opinion, I watch sports and I enjoy sports that are competitive, where the result matters. That's what sports watching is about, in my opinion, anyway. And the Marlins at this point, the result is irrelevant. And so you almost have to ask the question of, what is the point of watching this if the result is irrelevant? For me, for sports watching, it's about, does the result matter? And if so, I'm going to get into it. I'm going to see what happens. Like last year, we're all fully locked in because every game mattered. Every game, every single inning, we're all like living and breathing the Marlins. This year, and what's left now, like, what's the viewing experience? Why are you watching the Marlins? You've probably got them on in the background. You're probably tuning into a Max Meyer start, you know, when it's on in the background. But the focus shifts now. The focus goes to who's been traded for and how are they performing. And for Peter Bendix specifically, we've already seen with the Arias deal in this year, the optics are poor. The three guys have come back. Dylan Head's done nothing. He's been hurt. And the two other guys, in Marcy and Martorella, have regressed badly. Like, it's a bad indicator. Peter Bendix, at the moment, he's saying to the fans, this is what we're going to do. Trust me. I've been in the Rays. I can do it. Well, what we need to see is some of the reason to trust him. We need to see that someone they've identified can hit the ground running and they look a legit stud straight away. Peter Bendix really needs that. He really needs a few of them to like just hit the ground running, and the fans can kind of just take a collective breath. Because at the moment, the deal he's done with Arias and those prospects, bad luck. You know, let's see what these guys can do. It's going to be very, very interesting. I've got my concerns, I'm not going to lie, and I've shared this on Twitter. You know, a lot of talk around Agustin Ramirez, a lot of talk around him. People saying that he's the best prospect traded at this deadline or near to the deadline in general. For any club, he's the best guy by all accounts. For me, I've got a lot of concerns with that profile, and it just reminds me so much of Jorge Alfaro. I think of a power hitting catcher that can't catch. I mean, it's the same profile as Jorge Alfaro, is it not? but we're dreaming
Very
on it
similar.
again. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a prospect guy, but when I think about Jorge Alfaro and what he was and what we dreamt on and what he actually delivered, he did have, a fun stick and he could hit a few bombs. But man, oh man, there was tons of strikeout. And man, oh man,
Yep.
by the end, his catching it was not up to par, to a point where Chad Wallach was catching in the playoffs instead of him. He was the backup catcher at that point. So Agustin Ramirez, a prospect that effectively was unranked headed into this year. He's had a good year in AA, a lot of helium in that. But the scouting report is the stick's good, but there's some concerns with the catching. And for me, huge red flags on that. And that's the headliner. That's the headline piece for
Yeah.
Jazz
For
Chisholm Jr.
Jazz,
Yeah,
who
that's
is
it.
emerging into a superstar before
Absolutely.
our
Of course,
eyes.
yeah.
He's taken over
Of
baseball. I
course.
mean, everybody's tweeting about Jazz and the Yankees, and it's
Always
just,
going to happen, right? Always
yeah.
going to happen with that one with Jazz. And, everyone knows I'm a huge fan of his, obviously, and great to see him absolutely tearing it up. But listen, again, for Peter Bendix, he needs Agustin Ramirez to get into the organization and prove he can do it. And he needs Devison De Los Santos to do the same. And Connor Norby, he needs these guys to come in and look like legit players quickly.
Yeah.
Because if not, you then have to start asking the question of, are we trusting the right guy?
Right.
We're talking the talk, but if come the next deadline, what assets that, this was the deadline to Cook, and I've talked about it in my own show. Like, this was a huge moment and a huge deadline for Bendix. And he made a lot of moves and he's got a lot of guys in. The question is he got the right guys in, and can they be developed to big league players? That's what it's going to hinge on. Because if this goes wrong, this deadline, you then look and you think, okay, maybe you've got Luzardo to move and you've got Sandy. So there's still a few assets that they can move on from and get some pieces back. But it then gets pretty thin after that, where you're kind of thinking, what can you get back for, Vidal Brujan, Nick Fortes, Jake Berger, maybe, you know what I mean?
Maybe
Like, they run
a
out of
bag of
ammo
popcorn.
at that point, right?
Yeah.
They run out of ammo quickly, and then you've then got what you've got. So, Bendix and this approach for me, I'm watching closely. I understand why there's a lot of hype around prospects, and I think they got a lot of prospects back, and a lot of people like some of the deals. I'm particularly concerned about the catcher, though. But I want to be proven wrong, because, man, oh man, what an impact it could be for the Marlins for a power-hitting, legit catcher at the big league level. I mean, we've been crying out for that for I don't know how long, and it would be a huge difference maker for this club. But we'll wait and see.
This was Bendix's deadline. I mean, this
Yeah,
was the one he made the mark. For better or for worse, he stripped the roster of everybody that he could trade. Realistically, everybody he could trade, apart from Cronin and Nardi, they traded him. And so for this deadline to not work out, it would be a nightmare. So that is why all of the future success of Connor Norby, Kyle Stowers, and Augustine Ramirez, Davison De Los Santos, these guys have to produce. And I hope they're going to produce in 2025. But right now, we have to wait and see. None of them are up, and it's just a waiting game. And it looks like we have lost Peter. We have lost Peter Pratt for a second. So let us see here if we can get back in touch with him. I think he is going to rejoin the show, so we are going to see here. But that was a really good episode, guys. British GOAT, UK GOAT, Peter Pratt joining the show, helping me break down what has been an absolute chaotic, exciting, wonderful trade deadline season. And we're going to be back. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, YouTube, subscribe, share, Spotify, Apple. It's all going to be up there. And with that, let's go fish.